until you are the one that is ultimately responsible for your destiny. And when I say ultimately, I do mean ultimately in every aspect of your life. People don't, I think, really understand true freedom. And I don't think they truly understand how fulfilling it is when you are successful. Survival is overcoming, your environment, but true success is enjoying the fruits of that labor. I guess that's how I describe it. So, yeah.
It's very interesting. I've been, and as you know, I help businesses grow for a living, and I've been on so many business courses and programs. How to grow business, become a consultant, Lean Six Sigma. The list just goes on over the years, and there's some very interesting methodologies around. If you earn $250 an hour, well then. And your water pipes burst, then pay somebody who earns $100 an hour to fix it for you, and you keep making money. And I understand that on a Microsoft Excel sort of way of processing the world. But equally, the satisfaction that you get through having fixed the water leak yourself, or replumbed your own bathroom, or built an extension to your property, or re-roofed your property, or built the new workshop, whatever it may well be, that is genuinely priceless. You can buy bread from the store cheaper than you can make it. However, the satisfaction of making your own loaf of bread and then getting that butter and when the bread's still hot and tasting the bread you've made, there is something in that money can't buy, that I just wish more people would permit themselves to experience.
You bring up a good point. There has to be a balance there. I mean, there's a reason why we have cities, but there's also a reason why we have the ability to choose to go live off grid. And you have to figure out where you fit in all that. But you said that the satisfaction, the personal satisfaction that comes from knowing that you did that, you just can't touch it with anything else. It's a very unique and freeing feeling.
Yeah, it's more than a credit card swipe. So as we come towards the end of
very much so.
Yeah, that's it. As we come towards the end of our chat together, we've spoken around all sorts of things, but what I'm curious about is Wrangell, your gear brand, your gear business. How's it going? You gave me a heads up in our business promo interview a few weeks ago about how you set Wrangell up and what you're looking to achieve with it. But I mean, what's going on? What's the growth? What's the news? I suppose maybe people haven't checked that interview out, but what should they know about Wrangell? I mean, that's just the floor. Over to you.
Thank you. Wrangell was conceived on the roof of a house, actually. I was pressure washing moss off of a roof, and I had recently purchased a less than satisfactory tent. It was a high dollar name brand tent, and I'd taken out once, got completely soaked, didn't perform at all like I thought it should have. And I said, I can make something better. So at that point in time, I said, I don't want to be pressure washing roofs the rest of my life. I'm going to I'm going to do something with this idea. And it took me a while to get around to it. I admittedly procrastinated on it. However, I had I started fixing outdoor gear, some of my own, and then it ended up being for some friends. And then more people wanted outdoor gear sewn than made. And at one point in time, I had a good friend of mine. He wanted one of these outdoor quilts, which, if you're not familiar with quilts, they're kind of like sleeping bags, but without the zipper, and you just lay them over the top of you, and they cinch around your sleeping pad. And they're supposed to be a little bit lighter, maybe a little more comfortable for side sleepers or restless sleepers. And his mother-in-law's into sewing quilts. And so he talked to her, and she said, yeah, I'll help you sew a quilt, if you get the materials. So he bought all the materials and took it over to her house, and she looked at it. He showed her some pictures of what this, backpacking quilt was supposed to look like. And she said, that is not a quilt. Go find somebody else.
So often the world introduces you to a kindred spirit, somebody who you're like, I just want to talk to this person more. And that's happened to me. Today we're joined by Lowell. Amongst other things, Lowell is a hunting guide in Alaska, fishing guide in Alaska, but there's plenty more to this guy that we're going to step into as well. Lowell, welcome to the We Get Outdoors podcast.
Oh, thank you, Robert. Glad to be here.
So I want to kick off with a big question because I have no idea what the answer is to it, but that's how do you become a hunting guide in Alaska?
Oh, that is an excellent question. That has changed, and it seems to change over the years. So when I first got into guiding, I think it was a little bit different than it is now. For the most part, you needed to have 2 years of experience working as a packer before you could apply for your assistant hunting guide license. So basically, as a packer, you would do exactly that. You would pack around a lot of heavy things in the backcountry for either clients or your boss. Sometimes it was packing camps into a remote location. Sometimes it was packing harvested animals out of a remote location. And then everything that goes along with taking care of clients on, say, a 2-week hunt in the backcountry. So once you had that 2 years of experience, you go ahead and have a registered guide, basically write a letter saying they intended to hire you. And that would be submitted to the commission here in Alaska. They'd go ahead and issue you a guide's license after paying certain fees. So I think that's changed over the past few years, but it was relatively simple back when I got into the industry.
And so I know you're packing very heavy packs of gear in and out places so that clients can enjoy themselves. But what was your personal background in hunting and fishing before you went and started all of that?
I grew up loving the outdoors, and I got into fly fishing at a very early age. So I was, always out and about on different fishing trips, and I was pretty involved in trapping as well. So I did a lot of trapping of fur-bearing animals here in Alaska as a bit of a hobby to begin with, and then as a way to earn some income. And also just I love fur. Until you have been in very cold climates, fur probably doesn't make sense as a garment. But once you've worn it, there's no going back. At 30 below, you can be quite comfortable wearing fur. So I had that fly fishing background. I had the trapping background, and I was working for a general contractor actually, and he lived on a lake. He said, "Hey, you enjoy fishing. Why don't you go ahead and bring your canoe over? You can just go fishing after work." And to, a teenage, like me, I thought, well, my goodness, that can't get any better life can't get any better than this. So I, after work, a few times a week, I'd be paddling around the lake, trolling, and his neighbor, who happened to be his father-in-law, was a hunting guide. And he asked my employer, he said, "Hey, Rich, who's that kid that works for you? He's always out fishing. Do you think he'd want to pack for me on a personal hunt?" And Rich said, "Yeah, I bet he would." So I started packing for this now retired big game guide on his personal hunt. He was doing a sheep hunt that fall, and he'd had some injuries. So he just needed some help. And that's how I got into it. I think I was 15 at the time. And just spending time around the right mentors really helped me out. I didn't do really any hunting of my own until a few years later into high school. That's when I really started getting into it. But with all that experience just in the outdoors and just observing animals in their natural environment, it came quite naturally to me. That particularly the biology, ecology side of understanding wildlife.
Mm. So then there's the other part of this is well, there's plenty of parts, but talk to me about bears. That's always a curiosity. I've got some friends in North America who are very heavily into bow hunting, and they've got some they've got some close shave moments with bears when they've made a kill and the bear decides that the bear would quite like the kill, not the hunters. Like, how do you go about squaring off that circle, if you know what I mean, with clients, guns, trying to find other animals, and then keeping them safe from what arguably is one of the most dangerous predators about?
Yes. So, I will say that depending on your location, you're going to be dealing with a different type of bear. So in the lower 48, say the grizzlies up in like the Montana and the Rockies, I think Montana, Idaho area, Wyoming, those are a pretty mean breed of bear, I got to say. I think maybe there's just not as much food down there. They're a little cranky. Up here, obviously, we have bears that are a bit bigger, but there's more food to go around too. So, I have been in situations where, yeah, you have a bear movement on a kill. Usually it's when you have left the kill for a period of time. So say you started packing out a moose at, 11 p.m. because you shot it right at dusk and you just didn't get it all packed out. And the next morning you're out there at 6, but in that period of time you went and, rested and slept at 5-6 hours, bears moved in on the kill. That's an unfortunate situation because you're trying to recover, obviously, as much meat from their harvest as possible. And every situation is different, but you try and scare the bear off. Sometimes you run into bears that have been habituated to humans. And I would say those are the most dangerous type of bears because they're just not afraid of you. I grew up in Alaska, got to travel all over Alaska, and it's a wonderful place. Got to spend a lot of time in the wildlife refuges and preserves. But I don't think I've ever been so unnerved as when I went to Yellowstone for the first time, because the wildlife there just is not afraid of you. If you look at a moose here in Alaska, typically they realize that you're looking at them like you're looking at food. The wildlife isn't like that down there. So, having that natural fear of humans is a wonderful thing, particularly when you're dealing with bears. And when you don't have that, you can run into some, dicey situations, or just sometimes you have a bear that's confused. I love bears. Bears are a very unique critter. When you watch them in the mountains and in remote locations, you see each bear kind of has their own personality, and the way they putz along and smell stuff or play, or they're very carefree in a lot of ways. We end up removing that from our own personalities as we grow up into adults in most cultures. But, bears, they just, mosey along. Oh, I feel like scratching my back. Oh, I feel like, taking off for a run. But you also see some similarities. You don't see a large, older bear just take off for the pure joy of running. So there's just some observations about bears. They're just pretty cool critters, getting to watch them fish. But in general, just open your eyes when you're going through the woods. Be aware of your surroundings. Open your ears. Bears can be pretty quiet, but they can also be pretty loud. You'd be surprised how many people walk through the woods with headphones on. My goodness. You have all of your senses. Use them.
I had
when you're going. When you're going hunting.
Yeah,
go ahead.
No, I was going to say I had a friend in Idaho who always hikes with his multi-day hikes with his earphones in. And typically after he's packed his stowaway into his pack and he's just shouldering his pack, he pops the earphones in and he goes. And he had one morning where he popped his earphones in and started hiking and something didn't feel right. And he couldn't quite work out what, so he tried hiking faster. And it still didn't feel right. So he turned the music up louder and it still didn't feel right. Anyhow, eventually he stopped and tried to figure out what was going on. And as he stopped, there's a mountain lion following the trail he's just come, like 50 yards back, like walking towards him. And he swears that lion, and he has no evidence, but he swears that feeling that he had of it not being right was probably wasn't the hour, but it was probably a short period of time of this mountain lion actually just stalking him.
Yep. There's something to be said for that sixth sense. You might not be able to put a finger on it, but it's that trust in your intuition. And you can't put a finger on it, but by golly, you better listen to it. Same thing with bears. Just pay attention. Use your common sense. Don't be running through, a salmon stream or, a valley with a salmon stream at the bottom of it, expecting you're not going to run into a bear at the height of the salmon run. That's a food source for them.
Yeah.
Or, late in the fall, you're up in the mountains, expect there's going to be bears up there, gathering eat blueberries, getting fattened up for hibernation. So a lot of it, I would say, is kind of common sense. Just open your eyes and be willing to learn from your experiences, or just learn from your observations. Hopefully, what do they say? Experience is something you get shortly after you need it. I've known a few people, and well-respected guides and outfitters that have been chewed on and toyed with by bears. And a human and a bear, the human always comes out looking worse. Don't try not to get chewed on in the woods by bear, but odds are, if you spend enough time in the woods, you run a risk of it, even if you're doing everything right. There's just too many variables for you to account for all of them at all times. Did have one fellow I worked with. We had an agreement, though. We said, if there is a bear chewing on, either one of us, we said, do not shoot the bear, because I know you will be well-meaning, trying to, stop this bear mauling by shooting a bear. But if you miss and you hit me, I probably won't survive. But I'll have a good chance of surviving getting chewed on by a bear, and you can patch me up afterwards. That was our agreement. Everybody's different. I prefer to get chewed on than shot.
How do you help clients manage that, what seems like relaxing, peaceful environment, and yet you equally have to have that awareness of potential threats about you? Most of your clients are not a hunting guide. They've maybe come from the lower 48. It's their 1 week of the year where they get to go and do their thing. How do you help them stay safe and actually enjoy it and relax at the same time?
Oh, one thing I learned, I forget where it was. I was in some airport somewhere, and I heard a last call for my flight. I was sitting at the wrong gate. I guess last minute they'd changed. Well, not last minute, but they'd changed it, and I hadn't noticed it till the last minute. And I hear, it's like, I don't know, a quarter mile down the end of the concourse, and I take off running. And I thought, oh my goodness, I'm going to miss my flight. And, by the time I got to the gate, I bet I had 4 people running with me. And I learned that panic is contagious. So calm is also contagious, and something that, as a hunting guide, you have to be willing to be calm. And it's a choice. You have to be calm in the midst of either a regular day or in a very dire situation, because the last thing you want to do is have your client become panicked. Panic is very contagious. So you are the client's eyes and ears. In some ways, it's depends on the client. Some of them have more experience than others. Sometimes you're just a glorified babysitter, and other times you actually are helping somebody achieve a lifelong dream. And I love those hunts where you get to really know the client, get to understand where they're coming from, why this is important to them, and some of the other experiences they've had. Everybody is unique. You can learn something from everybody. But as the guide, you have to be comfortable with making all of the hard calls. All right, today we're going, we're not crossing this river because, or I want to hunt the other side, but the weather forecast says the rain's going to probably, end up raising that river level. We won't be able to get back across. You have to be able to make those calls, or maybe you make a bad call and you have to deal with the consequences, but maintaining that level of calm is always important. And just observing, keeping your ears open, your eyes open, and just being in tune with your surroundings. It becomes so second nature to taking care of people in the wild that you almost don't even have to think about it anymore. It's who you are. As when you say, oh, I am a guide, you're the individual that's willing to make those tough calls, remain calm, and make sure everybody else, you're the leader. Make sure everybody else is okay.
Mm-hmm. That's very profound. Now, hunting gets some very interesting press, doesn't it? Probably the press isn't
always.
The press isn't all bad in Alaska. I wouldn't have thought. It's part of the Alaskan culture, I suppose, for a majority of people. But throughout the rest of the world, You get, I can take it if a vegan says to me, or a vegetarian, they're against hunting. Like I'll go with that. That's fine. But there's a lot of meat eaters though who want to buy their chicken breast with cling wrap or cellophane around the outside of it in a polystyrene carton from a supermarket somewhere, and yet they don't like hunting. Talk to me about that hunting experience of hunting to fill the freezer. What is it that people who haven't done it maybe should be aware of?
Well, you bring up a really great point. Hunting does get a lot of bad press, and unfortunately, it's oftentimes a very limited few that create that bad press, or a categorically whole that doesn't deserve it. That's unfortunate, but we see that in way more areas than just hunting. I'm an individual that I like my home canned non-GMO beans, but I also like going out and filling the freezer with a moose that I've harvested. And when you care about something, you want to see it do well. Think about like a parent for their child, or a business owner in their business. They care about it. It's a passion. So when you are a true hunter, you care about the health of your wildlife populations. You care about the health of the habitat. And as a hunter, you also understand that as humans, we are part of that circle of life, that circle of death, depending on how you look at it. Life begets death, begets life. And when you go out hunting, typically it's in the environment that I hunt in, it's pretty challenging. You put in a lot of work. It's not, I'm just going to go out and shoot something and bring it home. No, you're carefully planning out where you're going to go and how you're going to get the meat back out once you've harvested an animal, because you can't just let it sit in the woods. You have to make sure that it's well cared for. You do a field dressing, quarter, butcher, and you bring it back home. And there's a lot of effort involved in that, from the field to the home step. There's a lot of trail time, typically, with heavy loads on your back. And you get back home and you're processing it. You need to hang it and let it age, and you're grinding it into a burger, or you add different seasonings. You're having chorizo and taco, and maybe make some sausage links. It's where that food came from. You watched that animal and made sure it was healthy prior to harvesting it. And the amount of care and respect you have for the resource, as well as categorical, moose population in this case, and for what you've harvested, drastically increases when you've gone to that much effort to obtain it. So somebody that is opposed to hunting, there's a lot of different viewpoints in the world. Likely they've been exposed to hunting as maybe an ego-driven type of a pursuit, which true hunting isn't an ego-driven pursuit, but a lot of people make it out to be, and it's difficult to differentiate those people, because they would call themselves hunters, but they probably don't have the same level desire to learn about the environment, the biology, the ecology of what they're hunting, and the impact that they're having, and what they can do to also benefit the overall population of those critters, so that they have that resource for the next generation. True conservation is hunting for the next generation. It's using a resource wisely enough that we still have that in the future. So that's what I would say. There's different ways to look at it. That's how I look at it, and how I approach guiding, hunting for myself, and just taking people out. I really love it when you're on a hunt and you see a client, after maybe 10 days of hunting, they kind of start having this aha moment when they begin to understand how they fit into the cycle. Humans are part of that environment. And when they realize that, and they are immersed in kind of the cyclical rhythms of that environment, and they understand how difficult it is to obtain, a trophy if they're trophy hunting, or just meat for the freezer if they're meat hunting. And once they've realized the difficulty and the challenge and the effort that goes into that, they respect that resource so much more. And there's a lot of people that say, "Oh, well, trophy hunting is it's just a horrible thing. It's all ego driven." Well, there's some people obviously that are going to be like that. But when you look at it from the standpoint of, in Alaska for Dall sheep hunting, we have this rule where it has to be a legal animal is full curl to be legal. So it's the sheep horns go completely 360 degrees around they grow out of the back of the head and then come around. It has to be 8 years old or broomed on both sides, or broken off, I think, on both sides. I think that's the regulation currently. Those critters, those are considered a trophy animal if you harvest those. But at 8 years old, those sheep aren't going to live very much longer.
Mm.
When they're, living in the mountains is tough. It's really rough on critters. Many times you'll see, processing or butchering up field dressing animal, and you'll see old injuries, or you'll see that their teeth are just worn down and they can barely chew, their grasses and lichens and whatnot. And that animal was very, very close to dying of what we would call natural causes, whether that's, an avalanche in the wintertime, or just exposure or starvation, or maybe getting eaten by a wolf or a bear. And when you think about those alternatives to being harvested by an ethically minded hunter who is going to appreciate the resource, display this sheep, maybe as a trophy on the wall to preserve that regal look that animal had when it was in the mountains, and to be able to tell people about it. More people, it's kind of like when you have maybe an animal in a zoo or a wildlife sanctuary, and they use it as kind of an education tool to let people know, hey, this is this animal, this is where it lives, this is what it eats, this is what it needs to survive, and this is how we as humans affect it. If you have a trophy that was going to die anyways of natural causes, which typically are much more gruesome than being harvested by a hunter, and you get to use that resource, you have the meat, and you get the trophy out of it as well, is in addition to the experience and having an aha moment while you're in the mountains, understanding where you as a human fit into that natural environment. It's a good thing. Overall, a lot of people don't understand how complex all of that is, but when they parcel it out in their own mind and actually think about it critically and try and place themselves in a situation where they can learn another viewpoint, I think that there is a lot less bad press in regards to hunting. That's been my experience, at least.
Yeah,
a lot of it comes from ignorance.
Yeah, I think that there's, the press that makes mass media about hunting is often more of a massacre than it is a hunt. And I think that people get very attached to that idea of, people going out and shooting everything that moves as opposed to a moose. And there is that perception. I challenge people, Lowell. I don't know if I told you this, but I'm 45, and I hunted for the very first time in my life last year. Very first time, last July. It was almost a year ago. And it was an interesting, it's a series of events that take you to a place where you're going to go and do something new. And the first of those events was last January. I got the opportunity to go to an abattoir and follow lambs to the slaughter, literally lambs going to be killed. And I was pretty disturbed as a meat eater by what I saw. You see all of these lambs all bunched up next to each other with no breathing space at all. And they're all watching their friends or I don't know, friends, but the other lambs get strung up by the rear legs and then go through, and they see the lamb in front of them get, well, fried, an electric bolt through the brain. But then they equally see, because if they're 8 back, they'll see them getting their necks slit and guts ripped out as well, just after they've been electrocuted or had a metal bolt go through the brain. And I watched this and I thought, I know by the textbook definition of how an abattoir works that this is ethical, right? I watched it, and yet still part of me thought, I don't know if I want to eat that lamb, having seen what it's gone through. And then last year I got the opportunity to go hunting here in South Africa, and I was amazingly surprised and pleased about what it is I observed and what it is I got to do. Watching a kudu, that is a elk-sized deer here, watching one of those get shot at 350 yards. By the time the kudu heard the crack of the rifle, it was dead. It was just eating grass, and then it was dead in, I don't know, a second, maybe less.
Yeah.
And it didn't know we were there until it was dead. And all it knew, it was kind of eating, well, it was quite early in the morning. It was eating breakfast in my humanistic view of explaining this. And I thought, actually, this is the meat I want to eat. This is what I want to put in my freezer. This feels, if I'm going to eat meat, this does feel ethical to me. It felt a lot more humane than the abattoir experience. And I guess if people went to an abattoir, they may well choose to view meat very differently.
I would venture to bet the same thing. There's a lot of ignorance that goes along with just consuming what is on the grocery store shelves. And yeah, if people actually knew what was going on, I think they would understand that hunting is when done correctly, very ethical, and it should be sustainable as well. Obviously, we figured out more efficient ways of harvesting meat, and that's why we have slaughterhouses, and I believe you pronounce it abattoirs over there here in South Africa. And we, in our minds, we say, oh, well, that's ethical. But when we see it firsthand in comparison to, like you were saying, the actual hunting, it's a much more intimate connection with your food. If you go out and harvest it, you're not just hunting. Here, harvest berries in the fall, go out and grow a garden. When you are more connected to your food source, you care for it more, and you care what's going into the soil. Say, what type of fertilizer you're using. Say in a gardening situation, you care more about the environment and what you are doing to make it healthy when you are actively involved in figuring out where in the procurement of your food, either growing or harvesting. So yes, we have these big cities, and we feed a large populations of people by this more efficient method of commercial farming and commercial harvesting of meat. But I would venture to say that most people don't understand really what that looks like up close and personal. And so they say, well, we just accept it as a society, and anything else must be horrible. But they really have no idea.
I'm very heavily. Oh, sorry, go on.
Oh, I was going to say the true organic vegetables have the slugs and the ladybugs and the aphids. They come with it all. Same thing with your, harvested wild game. It comes with the sweat and the toil and the bug bites. And it's like more of the true paleo diet when you're going out and actually harvesting it versus just buying it off the shelf.
Yeah, I'm very heavily into permaculture or no-till type gardening. That's something I spend a lot of time doing. And one of the things that I got taught very early on in that journey was that if you're going to do that sort of permaculture, no-till type of gardening, that actually your job is to maintain and feed the soil, and the soil will then produce the vegetables or the fruits that you want from it, which is an interesting twist on traditional farming stroke agriculture, where you think you're feeding and nurturing the plants. In permaculture, it's about maintain the soil, look after the soil, and the soil will do the work for you. And I think that's a very similar attitude to what you're saying for hunting, in as much as if you can maintain the environments for the animals to live healthily in, they will do well, and you will do well off the back end of it. When you take that 8-year-old sheep, for instance, and harvest it, that, as you say, in the next 12 months, it's probably going to die a not very pleasant death anyway. Well, maybe a bullet and 2 seconds is far less painful and traumatic for them. And equally, maybe that makes more vegetation available for younger sheep, for instance, to come through and actually have things to eat and places to go.
Oh, I'm sure that there is a balance there. You obviously have a carrying capacity of any environment, and I'm sure sheep territory, sheep country is no different. You have one sheep that dies, it provides more habitat for others.
So, talk to me about your childhood. We're all brought up by different parents in different ways. And you mentioned that you got into fly fishing at a very young age. And a lot of parents have this desire for their kids to graduate school and then go to university and get maybe a fancy job. And was that the path that your parents kind of had in the back of their mind for you? Or were they like, he can make up his own mind? Or how were you raised that led you to today?
Oh, well, I think I've heard it said before, I could never be so lucky again. My parents obviously had those expectations, just like every parent does. But from a pretty early age, I expressed a very keen interest in learning about the animals and the environment. I really thought that I wanted to be a wildlife biologist for a long time, until I realized, probably mid-high school, that it'd be 4 years of university, and then on top of that, probably a couple of years of working not so great jobs, and then ultimately I'd end up working for the government. And I really wasn't that interested any longer in the whole wildlife biology route. And I thought, well, I still love learning about just the world around me. And is there a different route? I loved fishing. I loved being out. I loved trapping, not so much because I was catching fur-bearing animals, but because I was learning about them. I learned so much just about their habits, the environment they live in, what they eat, how they travel, what things affect them, just thinking like an animal. So I really, really enjoyed that. So when it came time for kind of that decision to go to college, I actually went more of a trades route so that I'd have a bit of a skill in addition to the whole guiding thing. Now, becoming a guide in Alaska takes, I think, about 7 years, or it did at the time, to become a registered guide and outfitter. So if you think about that, going to school for 7 years, you could have your master's at least, maybe a doctorate. So you could really get, you go two different directions there, but they're both education. One just has the plaque on the wall, and the other has more of the experience and the knowledge base that helps you appreciate the world you live in a bit more intimately with in relation to the natural environment. So I got my first job deckhanding actually for a halibut charter right out of high school. Surprisingly enough, nobody in my family really did any hunting. We did a bit of fishing, but that's why there was a bit of a delay there in getting to the hunting side of things for me. But I really, really enjoyed just working around the fishing charters and worked on getting my captain's license. And then from there, also the guide's license.
Mm.
So that, gives you a little bit of an idea. I was always a child that wanted to be out and about doing something. I wasn't stuck behind a computer, or I wasn't a complete nerd and bookworm, but I enjoyed learning what I could from it. I was pretty involved in some outdoor organizations, did a lot of backpacking, just really, really cool trips to the Boy Scouts here. And I just getting to travel across Alaska. I think one of my favorite trips was getting to go and see the Valley of 10,000 Smokes, which is Katmai National Park. It's where the Nova Erupta volcano exploded in this big giant valley just filled with a couple hundred feet of ash. And then bears, lots and lots and lots of bears. If you look up Katmai National Park, you probably first picture you'll probably see is a bear fishing at the falls there near Brooks Camp. And how there was times when I would go on trips. I still remember I had a good buddy in high school. We went out trapping once, and I don't think my parents knew all the things that I was, all the trips and all the near close calls that I had. Still, I probably haven't. They'll probably hear this and say, "Oh my goodness, I didn't know this happened." But yeah, we drove up. We were going to do a little bit of lynx trapping. I think it was probably December. It was, I don't know, like -30, -35 degrees. And it's Fahrenheit, by the way. So I guess it's about -35 Celsius. But we get up to this parking lot where this trailhead is, and we have snow machines and whatnot. And we pull into the parking lot, and we had a skiff of snow, maybe like an inch of snow. And the parking lot just looked smooth. We couldn't believe it. We thought, my goodness, this looks like the best plowed parking lot we've ever seen at this neck of the woods in December. And we pull in, we're right in the middle of it, turn around, all of a sudden we feel this kind of sinking feeling in the back end of the truck. Kind of find out the entire parking lot was covered in what we call overflow, which is when you have really cold temperatures, creeks will kind of, water will end up seeping up, and you have basically a layer of slushy, crusty ice with slushy water and snow underneath. And there's about 2 feet of this. And so we're now sinking into what we thought was the parking lot, but is actually this big pond, basically. And we were quickly becoming part of the landscape at -30, -35 degrees Fahrenheit, freezing in place. So we're getting chainsaws out and cutting grooves in all this ice and jamming willow bushes underneath the tires, trying to get it all out. Finally, we did, at least relatively out. And we unloaded the snow machines. One of the snow machine throttle cables is just frozen. And so we dink around for like an hour trying to thaw this thing out. We just cannot get it. So finally, we both pile onto the same snow machine. We go out trapping for the day, and we come back, and we, load the snow machines up onto the trailer and start the trip back down the mountain in our vehicle with this trailer behind us. And we realized pretty quick that the brakes had frozen. Well, they got glazed in ice. And they didn't work very well when you have your brakes glazed in ice from all this overflow that we'd been in at -30. And it took us a while to get them brakes to work, but we made it down the mountain without too much trouble. But just adventures like that. I remember I'd take off, and I had a trap line that went up the side of this mountain, whatnot. I'd get dropped off, get a ride over there. And I had one person jokingly tell me, he said, that's definitely not a trap line, because a line is the shortest distance between 2 points. You have a trap zigzag.
What were you looking to trap, Martin, or what are you trapping?
Yep. So in Alaska, we have, they are marten, but they're more closely related to the Russian sable. That and lynx. That lynx, wolverine, otter, and trapping beaver is always a bonus. They make a great hat or material for beaver mittens. And long line trap lines are kind of a dying thing, even in Alaska. But that heritage, that very close relationship with the critters and the environment is important. That's fostered as a result of trapping. You might not be harvesting as many critters. You might not be doing it for profit per se, but that education that comes from being immersed in that is just invaluable. I love getting out and about. I still remember it was my first attempt at getting my parents to let me go hunting. I said, I'm going sheep hunting. I was probably about 16 years old. And their big thing was I always had to go with somebody, no matter where I went. For obvious reasons, they wanted to make sure I had, my battle buddy with me, somebody to at least notify them where to find the body, I guess. But I found this little device, an emergency locator transmitter, and they're like the size of a Snickers candy bar, an ELT. I thought, Eureka, this is my electronic hunting partner. And I bought one of them. I mean, it was like $300. And I told my parents, I had my bags packed. I had them, the freeze dried meals. I had the lightweight stove. I had the tent, the sleeping pad, everything. I said, I'm going sheep hunting. I even found a spot to go. I went and got my tags, and they said, who you going with? I said, I'm going with this. And I showed him that little emergency locator transmitter. And obviously that didn't fly, but I still carry it with me. It's a good idea. So, just little things like that. I love getting out and about and just learn everywhere I went. Just no matter where I went, there was something to learn about the different environments. You go into a mountain environment or you go down to the ocean environment, everything's different, and always pique my curiosity and learn about the critters and also the plants in those areas.
Mm. So before we came and hit record, I asked you if there's anything you wanted to talk about, and one of the things that you said was that people often put a lot of limiting beliefs in their own way about how to have a successful career or just a career in the outdoors. Now, I started working in the outdoors when I was 16, so that's almost 30 years ago now, and you've been at it for quite a while. What's your personal take on all of those limiting beliefs? Like you're never going to earn any money. It's a single person's game. You're going to be away from home the whole time. There's all those things that people put in the way. What's your beliefs or your take on all that?
There is some truth to that, but there's also a different way of looking at it. That's kind of my take on it. As you well know, there's a lot of money to be made in the outdoor industry, and you can make a living, but you have to be creative. I think particularly in the hunting and fishing industry, or in hunting and fishing side of that outdoor industry, it's changed what that looks like and what a business looks like and the profit margins, from 2 generations ago. It is something you need to be willing to think about different revenues or different ways of making revenue throughout the year. And you need to be a bit more creative, I would say. For me, I think that it's completely possible to make a living in hunting and fishing and just outdoor industry in general. But as far as the single person's game goes, that is a big question. Some individuals that get married and their spouse just can't handle them being gone, because you will be gone quite a bit. I mean, you are traveling, you are taking people with you into austere environments. So if your spouse is okay with it, I would say that's a huge limiting factor. And kids, I'm not at that point in my life yet, but I do know quite a few guides. They say, every year it gets a little bit harder to leave, but I still do it. I love getting out and guiding. But when I'm home, I'm 100% home. When I'm gone, yes, I'm dad's gone. But when I'm home and I'm 100% around my kids all the time, we go do things, we learn, we go on trips. So prioritizing that family life, if you want it, it's completely possible, but you have to be really willing to make that effort to balance your life that way. So for me, I commercial fished for a while. I realized that I didn't want to make a career out of that, but the same kind of barriers that I saw, and I think it's more than just in the outdoor industry, but people kind of get this idea of, commercial fishermen, for example, they go out to catch fish and they bring their fish back and sell them at the dock. Well, that is one way of commercial fishing. However, there are many other ways that you can go ahead and earn money. Commercial fishing. There's one fellow, I think I read an article about him. He was doing commercial fishing, almost like charter trips. So you can buy a commercial fishing license for it was like 1 or 3 days. And he was taking people out that wanted to experience commercial fishing. And he was charging them. So no matter if he caught, commercial or fish, or not, he was still earning money by having people on board. And he was getting basically free labor out of them. Now, probably not the best employees because they've only been on the job one day. But still, the idea is that it's creative. You can also direct market your fish. Instead of just selling to the dock, you could go ahead and head, gut, and gill them and sell them direct to a high-scale restaurant, overnight freight them, pretty much anywhere in the world if you wanted. And I would say there's been a bigger push for that over the past few years, but there's still a lot of resistance to that creative look at trying to make a living. So the guiding, same thing. I realized that, guiding can be a great job, but you need to have your own guide use area, preferably, on a wildlife refuge or a preserve, not preserve. There's different wilderness areas, throughout the state of Alaska. You can apply for different federal areas, which really does help with your business. So just having an exclusive use for that. So from a business standpoint, you need to have that look long term on how you're going to support yourself, but also the short term. You might look at, I need to do X number of hunts to be able to pay the mortgage. Well, maybe instead of paying the mortgage, you should have built a house, as you could afford it, and more of that mentality towards building a sustainable life for guiding, instead of just going the whole American dream route with a bunch of debt and end up being comfortably miserable at the end of the day, as I like to say. Somebody wants a desk job, they can go sit at a desk and have all their hopes and dreams. They end up having a midlife crisis and they realize none of those things are actually going to happen because they made choices that made it so they couldn't. So with guiding, you got to build your life around it, marry the right individual, be willing to work really, really hard. And, something I started doing was I started sewing outdoor gear. It's something that you and I talked a little bit before about, but I noticed kind of a hole in the market. I noticed a need. I had people interested in some products. So I started sewing backpacks and waterproof bags. So it's related to the outdoor industry. Is it specifically guiding? No, but it's a creative way of earning more income in an industry that I love.
I really like the word creative because in my experience in the outdoors, if you want to work in the outdoors and you want to go and strive for a 8 till 5, Monday through Friday, home every evening, can you do that in the outdoors? The answer to that is yes, but you're probably not going to get a lot of the truly enjoyable work. And you're probably not going to get any of the better paid work. So if you try and treat the outdoor industry like a corporate job, working for Microsoft or Nike or one of those, it's a bank, a big firm. If you try and treat it like that, I don't think that the outdoor industry will treat you. It'll treat you very well, but actually it won't be sustainable for the rest of your days. But I like the word creative. If you're willing to look at the world in a I don't know what the word is, non-trendy, not in the same way that everybody else does. So so I like what you said about buying a property and then building your house as you can afford it, so you're not carrying a huge mortgage. Just as an example, having a maybe if your business is seasonal, having an out of season business that you do that you can use to add to your income sources.
Absolutely.
I think one of the challenges is in today's world that people have become hardworking yet intellectually and creatively lazy at the same time. So they want what they want and they're willing to hustle 7 till 6, 5 days a week for it, maybe more, but they're not actually really willing to do what it takes to go and have the lifestyle that they really want. As you said, they can just be broke and miserable when they're 55.
Yep. I like to call that comfortably miserable or societally successful. And what I mean by that is you have this idea, all your peers are doing the same thing. And you say you buy into it, oh, that is what happiness is, or that is what fulfillment is, or that is what success is. And at the end of the day, you sacrifice your desire to dream and your desire, that innate desire to be unique, for certainty. And you end up being a very burnout and unfulfilled when you come to count up the balance sheets at the end of the day.
It's funny,
that's
isn't
something
it?
that I see.
People strive for that security and certainty, although what we've learned in the past 18 months from COVID is that, for me to get fired, Rob to get fired from We Get Outdoors is nigh on impossible. The business is mine. Like, it's very hard for me to get fired,
Yep.
or laid off, retrenched, whatever else, made redundant, whatever else you want to call it. And if one part of We Get Outdoors is struggling because of circumstance, well, I can go and build huge jungle gyms in a rich neighborhood for rich people for 2 days a week. And I can just go and say, well, I'm going to do outdoor jungle gyms as part of the business now. And the business keeps going and Rob keeps making his money. And I think that up until relatively recently, people viewed what you do and what I do as a high-risk way of generating an income for yourselves, almost up there with hedge fund manager or stockbroker. Do you know what I mean? That sort of level of risk. And I would argue that you and I carry very little risk. I mean, I carry almost no debt, and I can't be fired. And I'm pretty sure you're in a similar boat. So really, who is more certain and more secure? You or I choosing to go our own path creatively, or somebody who's got that, I don't know, 120 grand a year job that can be literally whipped out from underneath their feet at less than 30 days notice?
You make an excellent point there. People want they want certainty. And anybody that's selling them certainty is not telling them the whole truth, I guess, from my perspective, at least. The risk that comes from working for yourself is you might have to work harder. If things change, you have to be willing to have that. You have to be agile and willing to adapt. But overall, the risk is, I guess, what you make in your mind. That level of risk, it's different. But having the ability to being in charge of your own life and having the ability to make the decisions that will make or break you, some people just can't handle that, and others thrive on it. And I think that's where people like you and I, we quickly understand each other because of that. We realize that is a very important part of who we are as individuals. That autonomy of self.
I feel like yourself and myself, probably out of most people who are listening to this, actually genuinely have the meaning behind the word freedom. I find a lot of people who I meet talk to me about freedom, and they vote for a certain party based upon their ideas of freedom. And then when you actually get to talk to them, you find out that they owe maybe $700,000 on a property, and they've got student loans of another $350,000, and they're in above their heads to well over $1 million worth of debt in different forms. And you're not free at that point in time, because if you read the terms and conditions of all those debt agreements that you signed, all that stuff that you've got can be taken away from you literally tomorrow by the people who you owe the money to, if you actually go and read the terms and conditions. And that's not freedom. That's actually being controlled.
That's a wage slave.
Or what? Sorry?
Oh, that's a wage slave.
Yeah, you are a wait, and even if you own your own business, or you're a guide, or you're self-employed, and you're carrying all that debt, you're still not actually free because you're still actually controlled by the people you owe the money to. Like they have the ultimate control over your world. Um, and so I just think that the 2020, 2021 model of the world of buy all the shiny shit, do it all on credit, and then buy guns and claim that you're free. I would say that actually you've just sold your soul to the large corporations and all those people you're trying to be free from, probably because of greed or keeping up with the Joneses.
Yeah, very, very likely a combination of the above.
So I do want to get to Wrangell in a minute, but just to give people more of a whole picture of who you are, you've chosen to take this outdoor lifestyle to a true 360-degree lifestyle. And so talk to me, how did you end up living off the grid, having your own cabin, all those sorts of things?
Well, that's an excellent question, because I grew up with all the modern conveniences that you could possibly want. So when I moved to the Kenai Peninsula for a job following graduating from secondary school, and I really loved the area. So it was probably 2 years later. I stayed in the area. I was going to school at a local college nearby, working on more of a trade degree. And I just started looking for land. I knew that it was something I wanted, and I didn't want to take out a big loan and have a house that I might or might not be around if I was going to be guiding. If you're gone for 200, 250 days a year, it doesn't really make sense to buy, a big giant house you're not even going to be there at. You have to pay somebody to come check on it while you're away. So I bought some lands in an area I really liked. It's kind of more of a recreational property type area. People come out for the weekend type deal, but it's all off grid. Most people have to, take 4-wheelers or off-road vehicles to get to their places. And I bought some land that was nearby, but it was a bit set off from all of that hubbubaloo on the weekends. And I had a couple good years commercial fishing, and I just said one day, well, I've always wanted a cabin. I guess I better build one. So I read a couple good books. Actually, the best book on building with logs is not even in print anymore that I found. I borrowed it from a friend of mine and just built on it from there. I mean, there was no the original cabin that I started building was supposed to be a large shed that halfway through the project, I said, well, if I did this and I did that, it'd be actually a really nice little place that I could live in while I built a big house. And so I just learned as I went. I always done a little bit of carpentry work here and there on the side and just put that all into practice. At 19, I said, I'm going to build a cabin, and I did. And making up that, in my mind, that decision was the hardest part. You have you run into difficulties along the way, but if you have that desire, you will find a way. And I'd say desire is one of the single biggest determining factors in whether or not you achieve your goals. And I think that's across the board in life.
Yeah, I'd agree. So when you say you're off the grid, because lots of people say they're off the grid, but how far off the grid are you? I mean, what conveniences have you engineered or got for yourself, and what is there that you definitely don't have?
Well, I like to say we even have running water if you go run and get it. Life is what you make of it. So we get our water from a spring a little ways down the road. But it's the best water I've had here on the peninsula, though. So, running water, you got to run and get it, but you still have it. Heat, we heat with wood. Electricity, we do have a small solar system. So we have a PV array and a battery bank. And that makes a big difference. You can have, a freezer, a refrigerator if you want, lighting, etc. That makes things a little bit better. Just with, for example, doing a podcast, you need to have a phone or a computer to be able to go ahead and do that with. And running a business, you have to have internet. So I end up using different varieties of internet, or if I have to go to town, I'll do, a bunch of work while I'm in town type of a deal. So you build your life around it, I guess, in a bit of a way, but you also enjoy the peace and solitude where, somebody in a big city doesn't have, cow moose and twin calves walking through their front yard in the springtime. They don't have the wolves chasing the moose down their driveway in the wintertime. They don't get to, see all the birds or have, giant flocks of sandhill cranes come over land, in, a swamp next to your house. So you exchange some of those conveniences for peace and solitude and the ability to actually hear yourself think.
That's quite profound. I don't think very many people these days actually can find a space to lose themselves in their own thoughts, to dream to the point of creative execution of that, turning that dream into a reality. I think people have an idea and think it's a dream, but they don't actually fully whirl it around in their head in that daydream type place until, I suppose, a bit like your cabin was probably whirled around in your head in this plan, design. How am I going to do it? What's the opportunity? You couldn't do that if you've got cars honking their horns and people zipping by you and noise and stuff around you the entire time.
It keeps you out of that deep thought. That's for sure. There's constant distraction. We're so connected that we've become addicted to that interaction. It's the busyness that we come. The data. It's not even necessarily information. It's just data that crosses our screen, or as we swipe, or as we drive down a highway and we see billboards everywhere. It's so much data that our brains, I don't think, have the ability to process it. And then they've done studies. We don't have the ability to process it all. And so when you remove yourself from that, you end up thinking about things that matter in a much clearer sense, much clearer definition. So, and that's not to say that everything's easy, though, either. I mean, when you trade some of those modern conveniences, there's a reason why you get hooked up to the grid and have an electrical bill. It's because it's convenient. You're not the power generation. If there's a problem with the power plant, it's not your problem as the customer. But when you own a solar system, it is your problem. Or the other day, I had a backup generator. We had some really rainy weather. I had to charge the batteries. I needed to use a generator to do so. And my generator broke down. All of a sudden, I was a generator mechanic. Or in the middle of winter, when your driveway is, almost snowed in and you got 6 foot tall or 8 foot tall snowbanks on each side, you got to figure out how to make that work because you still got another, month and a half of snow in the forecast. It's not to say it's easy, but it's worth it. And that's true with a lot of things in life.
It's interesting, and I can't remember if I told you this last time we spoke, but I'm just moving to my own property in the absolute middle of nowhere. End of September, we will be there. And a lot of people don't get, their perception is that I'm making my life a lot harder in making this move. And I haven't yet found the way, but I know, having lived in the middle of nowhere in the past, that my life becomes a lot harder and a lot easier at exactly the same time. We've had water shortages. I'm in a city of 15 million people, and we've had quite hectic water shortages over the past week, 10 days. I've had 4 days with no water to the house, no water at all, not even bad pressure, just no water. And other than phoning up to the water company and complaining, I have zero control over that. And maybe having some big 20-litre jerry cans full of water for drinking, as a sort of prepping type approach. And where we're going to has got a borehole and a spring. So, if the water is harder to manage where I'm going to, but I'm not likely to run out. And if something does go wrong, well, I can personally go fix it and have control. Whereas what we've experienced here over the past 10 days is you just have to suck it up and do without water or electricity, because that's what's happened. I don't necessarily think people could understand it until they experience it for themselves.
Until you are the one that is ultimately responsible for your destiny. And when I say ultimately, I do mean ultimately in every aspect of your life. People don't, I think, really understand true freedom. And I don't think they truly understand how fulfilling it is when you are successful. Survival is overcoming, your environment. But true success is enjoying the fruits of that labor. I guess that's how I describe it. So, yeah.
It's very interesting. I've been, and as you know, I help businesses grow for a living, and I've been on so many business courses and programs. How to grow business, become a consultant, Lean Six Sigma. The list just goes on over the years, and there's some very interesting methodologies around, if you earn $250 an hour, well then, and your water pipes burst, then pay somebody who earns $100 an hour to fix it for you, and you keep making money. And I understand that on a Microsoft Excel sort of way of processing the world. But equally, the satisfaction that you get through having fixed the water leak yourself, or replumbed your own bathroom, or built an extension to your property, or re-roofed your property, or built the new workshop, whatever it may well be, that is genuinely priceless. You can buy bread from the store cheaper than you can make it. However, the satisfaction of making your own loaf of bread and then getting that butter and when the bread's still hot and tasting the bread you've made, there is something in that money can't buy, that I just wish more people would permit themselves to experience.
You bring up a good point. There has to be a balance there. I mean, there's a reason why we have cities, but there's also a reason why we have the ability to choose to go live off grid. And you have to figure out where you fit in all that. But you said that the satisfaction, the personal satisfaction that comes from knowing that you did that, you just can't touch it with anything else. It's a very unique and freeing feeling.
Yeah, it's more than a credit card swipe. So as we come towards the end of
very much so.
Yeah, that's it. As we come towards the end of our chat together, we've spoken around all sorts of things, but what I'm curious about is Wrangell, your gear brand, your gear business. How's it going? You gave me a heads up in our business promo interview a few weeks ago about how you set Wrangell up and what you're looking to achieve with it. But I mean, what's going on? What's the growth? What's the news? I suppose maybe people haven't checked that interview out, but what should they know about Wrangell? I mean, that's just the floor. Over to you.
Thank you. Wrangell was conceived on the roof of a house, actually. I was pressure washing moss off of a roof, and I had recently purchased a less than satisfactory tent. It was a high dollar name brand tent, and I'd taken out once, got completely soaked, didn't perform at all like I thought it should have. And I said, I can make something better. So at that point in time, I said, I don't want to be pressure washing roofs the rest of my life. I'm going to, I'm going to do something with this idea. And it took me a while to get around to it. I admittedly procrastinated on it. However, I had I started fixing outdoor gear, some of my own, and then it ended up being for some friends. And then more people wanted outdoor gear sewn than made. And at one point in time, I had a good friend of mine. He wanted one of these outdoor quilts, which if you're not familiar with quilts, they're kind of like sleeping bags, but without the zipper, and you just lay them over the top of you, and they cinch around your sleeping pad. And they're supposed to be a little bit lighter, maybe a little more comfortable for side sleepers or restless sleepers. And his mother-in-law's into sewing quilts. And so he talked to her and she said, yeah, I'll help you sew a quilt, if you get the materials. So he bought all the materials and took it over to her house, and she looked at it. He showed her some pictures of what this, backpacking quilt was supposed to look like. And she said, that is not a quilt. Go find somebody else. So I was the person that got the call, and I had no idea how to sew an outdoor quilt, but I looked at a couple of pictures and I said, I'm sure I can figure it out. So I said, sure, I'll sew that for you. And that just turned into, more and more projects, one of which ended up being a backpack. You're probably familiar with internal versus external frame backpacks. Internal frame backpacks kind of taking the world by storm. But the external frame backpacks are still the head load hauling kings of the outdoor world. Hailing all the way back to the original, pack boards that miners trekked up the Golden Staircase in the Klondike Gold Rush with. So there's been some developments, obviously, since the original, plywood and sometimes bone pack boards, but there's still a lot of external frame backpacks that do a good job of hauling heavy loads. But the bags, from my perception, have lagged a bit in development, particularly with just design and materials. So I had, again, some people ask, hey, can you sell me, this backpack bag? And I said, yeah, I think I can figure something out. And that just turned into perfecting it and sewing more of them. And so now basically taking backpack bags that were kind of one-offs and trying to take that into a production. So where I can actually stock backpack bags and to ship them out when customers purchase them on our e-commerce website. So everything's e-commerce based. That cuts out having to go through retail markup, which you well know. You can hand some of that savings on to the end user. It also allows you to put a lot more money into the materials and make a higher quality product based on the materials you choose to make that product out of. So that's the direction that Wrangell's taken with the backpacks for external frame freighter frames. We are working on our own frame. So right now you can basically buy a backpack, a Wrangell backpack, and stick it on your own external freighter frame of your choosing. And you can look at our website. We have some recommendations for that. If you are so inclined, or maybe you have a great frame that you really like, you can just put it right on there. So we're working on our own frames so we can sell a complete setup. So we got quite a few irons in the fire. COVID slowed things down a lot. We were ready to go to production in mid-2020, and then we got the word that the factory that we had contracted with to go ahead and make the bags got shut down. Employees with the COVID. So it's been a bumpy ride, but like I said, desire. That's the ultimate indicator of success, right? If you want to make something happen and you have the desire to make it happen, you'll figure out a way. If there's a will, there's a way, as they like to say.
So true. Did you ever make the tent, by the way?
I got a prototype. It needs a little bit more work. So that is yet another project. It is a future product for Wrangell. So I have more ideas than I know what to do with right now. I have to focus energies on a couple key products right now, but that will be coming out in the future.
And do you have a core theme for your gear? So I don't know, everything that you'd need for a wilderness night out. So the tent, the pack to carry everything. Is that a theme for you, or what's your theme?
I see a lot of outdoor gear companies. They end up, and I understand that from a business standpoint why they go this route. They come out with an initial product, and then they just build out an entire product line, and they have a cult-like following almost. Anything that has their name on it, people want to buy. If they made socks and underwear, they would buy it just because they think it's that great. And some of those companies make some really great products. I've had to take a little bit more of a grassroots approach to this. So if I'm going to make something, I need to have customers. I had people ask for it. So if you are really, really wanting a product, go ahead and go to our website, which is www.wrangellgear.com, and shoot us an email with your product idea that you just really, really want to have. But in the meantime, I have taken ideas that I've had that I know that I can make better than an existing product, and been focusing on those. And ultimately, yes, it would probably round out a full lineup. At this point, I'd rather focus on making good products than lots of products, though. So that's the direction we've taken. But Wrangell as a brand, specialty outdoor equipment is designed for people that are going to use their gear. They don't need to go on a hike and for one weekend out of the year. You might really appreciate our gear, but it's definitely designed more for the end user that's going to put it to the test. They're going to use it day in and day out. They might use the backpack during hunting season, but they're also going to use it when they go out berry picking, and they're going to go take it on their pleasure hike in the middle of summer, and they're going to throw all their gear when they're traveling in there as well. So yes, it's a bit of a lifestyle when you know that when you're going to environments where your gear needs to be, you always have to trust your gear. You only buy the best, and that's what we're trying to produce. So it's gear that's designed for the hunter, the gatherer, and the traveler. I guess is the best way of putting that. People that get out and use their gear, that enjoy using the resources and exploring the environment in a responsible manner. So get out there, use your gear, put it to the test, and let us know what you want that you don't see. And hopefully, the more support we can get, the quicker we can get backpacks out to people from a production standpoint.
Awesome. Well, so folks, go check out wrangellgear.com and go see what they've got available and give your input. And if there's something you specially want making, then send Lowell a message, and he'll step forward into it. The last question I have for you, or last real question, is in my mind, while Alaska is part of the United States, it's actually a country in and of itself. Lots of people dream of coming to Alaska and getting in the outdoors. But equally, the outdoors in Alaska can feel very threatening to people. It's very wide, very big, very tall, often quite, the weather can change quite dramatically, quite quickly. Somebody once told me of a July day in Alaska where they ended up with 3 feet of snow, and they weren't far north either. They just had some freak storm. So they'd gone out for a summer hike, and it wasn't quite what they expected. What would you say to people who are sat on the fence saying, shall I or shan't I? Maybe for next summer, 2022. What's your advice to them?
Well, I guess I would say that a basket full of regrets is heavier than a bushelfuls of Lowells. Get out there and do it. You if you have doubt in your mind, that's usually the feeling you have right before you end up growing. And so if you put yourself in an experience where it puts you outside of your comfort zone, that means that you are growing, and growth is a good thing. So no matter where you go in life, that is important. If it's coming to Alaska, do it. Make it happen.
I like it.
If you have the desire, and if that desire is great enough, you will definitely make it happen. There's a lot of resources. There's all sorts of blog posts. I think there's a couple different websites that help with travel to Alaska. There's a bunch of outdoor forums, backpacking, hiking, fishing, hunting type forums. And the thing about Alaska is a lot of it's very difficult to access. But even along the areas that are relatively easy to access, you can get off the beaten path pretty quick. You don't have to take an airplane ride if you don't want to some fly out special location. You could, fly into Anchorage, rent a car, and drive to the Denali Highway and go on a 3-day long backpacking trip, and then drive the rest of the highway, camp, a couple nights, explore the sites, and then drive back to Anchorage and fly home. Or you could flying to more of a coastal community and experience the more ocean environment. The interior of Alaska is gorgeous. I remember a few years ago, I was on my way up to do a horseback sheep hunt. I picked up a hitchhiker that had gone from Eagle, Alaska, and floated all the way down the entire length of the Yukon River in a kayak, just taken all summer. And he said, "Well, I want to do it." He's a Japanese fellow, had come over here and just so tickled. He just made his dream a reality. So get out there. Yes, the ambiguity of all can be a bit daunting, but we're so connected. There's so much information out there about pretty much anywhere you want to go, that if you're willing to look for it, you can find it. And that is the beauty of the internet and our connected world. It's a wonderful thing if you harness it for your benefit.
I concur. My attitude for adventure is always go and book the flights and then worry about everything else afterwards. When you've got the flight booked from the lower 48 to Alaska, or whether you're coming to Africa to come and see what we do here or whatever else, book the flight and work everything else out afterwards, because when you book the flight, you're committed. And so then after that, you've got to go and make your trip a good trip for yourself. So book the flight, and I think everything else will follow. Lowell, I want to thank you for your time tonight, or today for you, but it's tonight for me. I want to thank you for your time, and I want to thank you for living a life that's true, but also living a life that many people talk of but aren't brave enough to do for themselves. And without people like you living your life like you do, we'd have one less role model in the world of maybe becoming freer or happier or successful by a different measure of success. So thank you so much.
Oh, well, thank you for having me on today, and let me have a platform to share that with.
It's a pleasure. Now, if people want to catch up with you, follow you, stalk you on adventures, what's best? Obviously wrangellgear.com for Wrangell. Do you have an Instagram account or somewhere else they can chase you on?
Yes. So all of the Wrangell, especially outdoor equipment, the Outdoor Gear Company, on all the different social medias, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, that's all at Wrangell Gear. So you can follow it there. I don't share a whole lot of my adventures. A lot of them end up being, I have been horrible at taking pictures. A lot of it, I jot a few notes down in a journal, like, maybe snap one or two pictures, but I'm not all that great about sharing. So perhaps if people want more of that interaction, you could set me up in the right direction.
Cool. I will indeed. Awesome. Well, Lowell, thanks so much for your time. Stay awesome. Have a great day further. And I think our paths will cross in person next year. So let's enjoy a cold beer together.
At the very least. Thanks again, Robert.
Cheers, mate.